I thought I had the perfect life, until one night, I overheard whispers that shattered everything. My wife, my best friend, a secret affair right under my nose. But instead of falling apart, I set a trap that would expose them in the most humiliating way possible. They never saw it coming. My close friend Nick and I have known each other forever, at least since our college days. We're both married men in our mid-30s, each with over 15 years of marriage behind us. My wife, Lucy, is 35, and Nick's wife, Rachel, is 38. The four of us used to spend a lot of time together as families, celebrating our kids' birthdays, supporting each other through tough times, and sharing life's highs and lows. Honestly, I believed nothing could ever break our bond. Turns out, I was completely wrong. Reality was far more complicated than I ever imagined, and I had no idea what I was walking into. One day, I was hosting a small gathering at my house, something we did every few weeks. I guess I overindulged in drinks and passed out early. Nothing unusual about that. Most of the guests had already left while I was completely knocked out. At some point, I half woke up, but I didn't let on because I was still groggy and hoping to drift back to sleep. You know that feeling when you wake up for a moment, but aren't ready to deal with reality yet? That's exactly how I felt. As I lay there with my eyes closed, trying to doze off again, I heard footsteps entering the room. Right away, I recognized the voices, Lucy and Nick, my wife and my best friend. They were whispering. Now, eavesdropping isn't exactly the most honorable thing to do, but curiosity got the best of me. What could they possibly have to discuss in private like this? Lucy told Nick to keep quiet, so he wouldn't wake me. At first, I thought it was sweet. She didn't want me disturbed. Little did I know, her concern had nothing to do with looking out for me. From what I could hear, there were still a few guests in the kitchen. So Lucy and Nick wanted some privacy. Then, my wife started talking about how much she had enjoyed her last intimate moment with Nick the previous time they had managed to meet up. In that instant, I snapped fully awake, desperately hoping that I was either dreaming or mishearing things in my half-asleep state. But no. Nick responded, saying he wanted to repeat soon, and asked when I would be leaving for my next work trip. For context, my job requires frequent business trips, usually lasting 2 to 3 weeks. I was set to travel in about a week. Lucy then gave me the exact dates of my upcoming trip. They arranged for Nick to come over while I was away and even stay for a couple of nights, telling his wife he was going on a fishing trip. Lucy said she would send our kids to their grandparents' house, so they wouldn't be in the way. I remember thinking, wow, these two really had everything planned out. Talk about being sneaky. Once they finalized their plans, I heard the unmistakable sounds of them getting a little too close. Right there in my house. Before things could escalate, someone in the other room must have made a noise that startled them because they immediately quieted down. Thank God for that, because if they had gone any further, I don't think I could have kept my composure and stayed silent. Even just hearing their conversation had my blood boiling. I was burning with rage and craving revenge, but I needed a plan. Obviously, I didn't go on that work trip. Instead, I checked myself into a nearby motel for a couple of days to figure out the best way to handle the situation. Eventually, a plan formed. I decided to bring Nick's wife, Rachel, into the loop. She had a right to know the kind of man she was married to. We had known each other for years, and I couldn't let her stay in the dark. Here's what I did. On the day I was supposed to be out of town, I knew Lucy and Nick would be at my house. I called Rachel, telling her I had planned a big anniversary surprise for Lucy and needed her help to pull it off. To make the story more convincing, I even picked up some flowers. We met outside my building, took the elevator up, and I unlocked the door with my own key. Sure enough, we walked in on them, right in the act. That was all the proof anyone needed, even beyond the fact that Nick was supposedly on a fishing trip. Rachel was stunned at first, but then she snapped. Furious, she immediately confronted them. What followed was absolute chaos, arms flailing, legs kicking, screaming, and curses flying everywhere. The fight was intense, and emotions exploded in every direction. I didn't even get a chance to intervene. Rachel was absolutely livid. In her fury, she handed out plenty of bruises in mere minutes. Then, I proposed we toss Lucy and Nick into the corridor, which we did without hesitation. After that, I bolted the door, went inside, and immediately started packing up my wife's belongings. She would officially receive them when the divorce was finalized, but I wanted her out of my space right away. Meanwhile, Rachel, emotionally wrecked, stormed off after putting an end to her confrontation. Out in the hallway, Nick and Lucy stood there, half-dressed and completely dumbfounded. Neighbors emerged from their apartments, drawn by the commotion. Lucy desperately tried to get them to call the authorities, claiming I had lost my mind and thrown her out her own home. However, she couldn't exactly justify why her supposedly fishing husband was standing beside her in such a humiliating state. That raised more than a few skeptical eyebrows. A few sympathetic neighbors offered them some spare clothes. The police eventually arrived, but after hearing my side of the story, they could barely suppress their amusement. They simply requested that I hand over Lucy's suitcase, as there was no justification for keeping her belongings locked inside. That was the only thing she received from me until the divorce proceedings were over. Everyone in the hallway quickly pieced together what had transpired. There were hushed murmurs, judgmental glances, and a few choice words exchanged among the onlookers. Nick's wife, well, she wasn't one to be trifled with. He was lucky she didn't knock him unconscious on the spot. I did feel a tiny bit guilty about deceiving Rachel with the whole anniversary surprise ruse, but in the end, it served a greater purpose. My minor fib shattered a monumental deception. That night, I slept alone in my own bed, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. No deceitful wife sneaking around, no backstabbing best friend lurking in the shadows. Just silence, calm, undisturbed, and long overdue. What happened next? Nick's wife wasted no time. She filed for divorce and threw him out, forcing him to crash with relatives. Lucy had no choice but to return to her family. As for me, I immediately filed for divorce and requested the court to bypass the reconciliation period. Our kids were older, so I was upfront with them about why the marriage was ending. The judge understood my stance and expedited the process. With that, I regained my freedom. Out of sheer curiosity, I later asked Lucy how long she and Nick had been having their affair. Her response, sent in a casual text message, left me completely floored. She admitted that she had only remained faithful for the first 2 years of our marriage. For over a decade, she had been living a lie, deceiving me at every turn. Words cannot describe the agony of realizing you've been wearing those invisible horns for that long. But I knew I couldn't dwell on it forever. If I had allowed myself to keep fighting over it, I might have lost control and done something I'd regret. Instead, I accepted the truth and moved forward. Looking back, our marriage had been dead for years. I just hadn't recognized it. At least that small moment of vengeance gave me some satisfaction. It made me feel less powerless. Now, every year on the anniversary of my divorce, I celebrate what I call my Independence Day. It might sound odd to some, but to me, it's a meaningful reminder of the day I finally broke free from betrayal. As for Nick, I have no idea what became of him, and I don't care. I don't track his life, and he no longer exists in mine. After the divorce, my kids remain with me. I have been their sole provider, both financially and emotionally, ever since. So far, I haven't entered any new relationships. I also gave up those long business trips. If I ever decide to settle down again, I need to be absolutely certain that my partner isn't secretly betraying me while I'm away. I'm done living in the dark.